Hey guys, tonight we're heading back to ancient Rome. Not to the Colosseum, not to war camps or temples, but to something far quieter, greener, and strangely crunchy. You're walking barefoot through a palace garden. The air is warm. Somewhere off to your right, a fountain trickles lazily, its sound echoing softly through rows of trimmed hedges. You catch the scent of rosemary olive trees and cucumbers. Dozens of them. Not just lying in neat garden beds, but housed in strange glass-covered carts perched on wheeled platforms that can be moved with the arc of the sun. Roman servants glide between rows, adjusting little slatted screens to protect the imperial produce from sudden gusts. You blink, and for a second it almost feels like you've entered some sleepy cucumber cult. But you haven't. Not exactly. You've simply entered the imperial gardens of Emperor Tiberius, whose love of cucumbers went well beyond the normal salad craving. So much so that you're probably not surviving this place unless you learn to bow respectfully to a vegetable. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, post your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing where everyone's drifting off from around the world. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The moment your feet hit the soft loam of the garden path, you're met with the sight of carefully stacked stone beds, some with soil, others with what appears to be clean white sand. Cucumber vines coil lazily around small trellises, their leaves gently swaying as if in agreement with the breeze. And standing there, arms crossed, looking profoundly proud, is the imperial gardener. Let's call him Lucius. He's been up since before dawn, tending to these cucumber vines like they're royal infants. You follow him deeper into the garden past benches, where senators once napped, and toward a sunny corner flanked by fig trees. Here, a group of palace workers is slowly wheeling a covered cart toward a brighter patch of grass. Inside the cart, more cucumbers. Yes, the cucumbers are being moved to maximize their sun exposure. These aren't just vegetables, they're a status symbol. Tiberius, your current host in this dreamlike stroll, was emperor from 14 to 37 CE. He wasn't exactly Rome's most beloved leader. Tacitus called him moody aloof and obsessed with privacy. But one thing Tiberius absolutely did not keep private, his obsession with cucumbers. According to Pliny the Elder, the imperial palace used clever frames of mica, a thin, translucent mineral, to create mobile cucumber greenhouses that could trap heat and light. These carts were wheeled around the garden throughout the day, so cucumbers could grow even in winter. You pause by one of the carts and run your fingers over the mica panes. They're smooth, warm, and just a little foggy from the trapped moisture. Inside, a single cucumber glistens like it's waiting to be worshipped. The thing is, ancient Romans didn't exactly define vegetables the way we do. What we now call a cucumber, Cucumis sativus, was part of a larger family of soft, juicy garden fruits that included melons and gourds. Cucumbers were valued not just for eating, but for symbolism, fertility, healing, and abundance. And to Tiberius, they were apparently the closest thing to divine intervention that fit on a dinner plate. You pass a marble sundial embedded in the path. Lucius the gardener checks the shadow and makes a quiet sm noise. It's time for the afternoon cucumber rotation. You glance up. The palace walls are distant now. You've wandered far into the imperial estate, where the noise of Rome fades into birdsong, and the soft brushing of vines against stone. Someone hands you a small bowl olive oil vinegar, a pinch of honey, and sliced cucumbers. The taste is fresh, earthy, just a touch tangy. There's a reason this was served at elite Roman banquets. Tiberius wasn't just munching raw slices. His cucumbers were pickled, drizzled, even fermented into mild tonics. Here's your first mainstream fact of the night: Tiberius's gardens helped inspire centuries of Roman elite horticulture, and historians often cite them as precursors to early greenhouse design. Your quirky tidbit: there are records suggesting cucumbers were rubbed on skin to prevent sunburn, treat scorpion stings, and even ward off evil spirits. One folk belief said that sleeping with a cucumber near your bed would chase away nightmares. Not proven, but tonight we're giving it a try. And now the open debate. Historians still argue whether the cucumber mentioned by Pliny is the same as our modern Cucumis sativus. Some believe the Romans were cultivating a different, now extinct variety, closer to a melon with thicker skin and more bitter flesh. Others think the name was used interchangeably across various gourd-like plants, making it nearly impossible to track exactly what Tiberius was obsessed with. Either way, We know this, he wanted them. He got them, and by Jupiter, he made sure they grew all year round. You close your eyes and rest for a moment on a stone bench. Somewhere in the distance you hear laughter, soft, slow, echoing through the hedgerows. It's hard to tell if it's coming from a senator, a servant, or just your own sleepy brain finally drifting into Roman twilight. There's still much more to wander through. The cucumbers are only just getting started. You're still in the garden. The air feels a little cooler now, the sun dipping slightly behind the palace walls. The vines stretch toward the last golden rays like little green supplicants reaching for divine approval. You wander past another row of carefully wheeled cucumber carts and hear two palace servants chatting in low voices. They're discussing lunch preparations, but the real gossip, it's about the emperor himself. Apparently, Tiberius refused to eat anything unless it included his daily cucumber. Sliced, pickled, mashed, chilled, didn't matter. No cucumber, no peace. Tiberius, son of Livia and stepson of Augustus, might have ruled the empire with a reluctant hand, but when it came to his food preferences, he was, let's say, assertive. He wasn't known for lavish indulgence like Nero or Caligula. In fact, Tiberius famously withdrew from much of public life and ruled the later part of his reign from the island of Capri, where, yes, cucumbers followed him across the sea. Servants were tasked with maintaining year-round gardens, and during colder months, the cucumbers had to be nurtured like sacred infants. A legion could march on Rome without consequence, but heaven helped the servant who let a cucumber freeze. And it's not just because he liked the taste. You stroll through a shaded archway where stone columns cast long shadows across mosaic-tiled floors. Murals here depict pastoral scenes, fields, rivers, lazy oxen, and in one corner tucked into the background, a figure holds out a long green vegetable. It's faint, but unmistakable. Some archaeologists believe cucumbers became a low-key imperial motif hidden in garden scenes, and banquet murals like subtle Easter eggs from a first-century food influencer. Tiberius's obsession wasn't entirely aesthetic. There was method to the madness. Roman medical theory at the time was built around the concept of the four humors blood, phlegm, black bile, and yellow bile. Foods were considered hot or cold, wet or dry, and cucumbers were thought to have a cooling, calming effect on the digestive tract. Perfect for a man as famously anxious and secretive as Tiberius. You sip from a chilled goblet of infused water. There's cucumber in it, of course, with a hint of mint and crushed fennel. Refreshing, subtle, weirdly grounding. Here's your mainstream fact for this section. Tiberius's enthusiasm was so well documented that later emperors inherited not just his policies, but also his peculiar gardening routines. The imperial gardens became known for their constant cucumber yields, regardless of season. This influenced how Roman elites across the empire structured their own villa gardens, with greenhouses, shade structures, and dedicated staff trained in vegetable care. And now, a delightfully weird nugget, there's a preserved shopping list found near Herculaneum, a wealthy Roman town obliterated by Vesuvius, that includes 1 jar pickled cucumbers for master's footbath. No context, just that. What does a cucumber footbath do? Cool your temper, cure athlete's foot. Historians aren't sure, but it does make you wonder what Tiberius's spa days were like. Speaking of historians, here comes the open debate. Some scholars argue that Tiberius's love of cucumbers was political theater. By focusing on simple earthly pleasures like vegetables and astronomy, he crafted an image of moderation, a philosopher king, a man above bloodlust and palace intrigue. But others suggest this was mere eccentricity, or perhaps a form of control. When you rule millions and everyone fears you, the only thing left to micromanage is your salad. You follow the corridor into a cool storeroom beneath the villa. Here on wooden shelves sit dozens of clay jars sealed with wax. You pick one up. It's heavy, faintly damp. Carved on the side, Acetaria tiberi. Tiberius's pickled things. The servant next to you chuckles. Some people name their children. He named his cucumbers. You can't tell if he's joking. The further you wander into the emperor's domain, the more you realize this wasn't just a culinary preference. It was an identity. Tiberius the recluse. Tiberius the astrologer. Tiberius, father of the imperial cucumber. You imagine a morning in his life. He wakes late, his villa quiet, except for the distant echo of waves. A tray appears, bread olives and chilled cucumber slices arranged in a spiral. He eats in silence, staring at the sea, already planning the day's correspondence. Reports from Egypt, a tribute shipment from Gaul, a whisper about a senator's rebellion. He sighs. Too much drama. He pours himself a cup of wine, with a single cucumber spear soaking inside. The air shifts around you. A breeze carries the scent of citrus blossoms from nearby groves. It's almost enough to make you forget the empire stretching beyond these walls, the provinces, the legions, the constant demands of rule. But not Tiberius. He remembers. He just chooses to focus on the things he can control: the angle of the sun, the daily temperature, the perfect vine curl. Back above ground, Lucius has returned to his vines. He crouches low and whispers something to a plant. A superstition. A recipe you can't quite hear. But the cucumber seems to respond, its leaves shifting ever so slightly toward his voice. You lie back on the soft earth for a moment, the sky turning from gold to amber above you. Somewhere in this strange garden of emperors, a legacy is growing. Green, cool, quietly ridiculous, but persistent. And so are you. The sky overhead is ripening into dusk, and the cucumber carts, yes, they're still being wheeled around, are now chasing the last light of day, like sunbathers reluctantly leaving the beach. You stretch your legs and follow a creaking cart as it's pushed toward the edge of the orchard. The air smells of pine sap, damp soil, and something else resin maybe. It's coming from the cart. You peer closer and realize the greenhouse cover isn't glass at all. It's something thinner, warmer to the touch. A translucent sheet of rock mica. The cart beneath it holds not just soil, but carefully insulated layers of compost and sand to trap warmth. The cucumber nestled in the center looks smug. As well it should. It's lounging in the Roman version of a spa day. Welcome to the world of Foss portable greenhouses, ancient style. You climb onto a low stone wall to get a better view. From here, the whole operation unfolds like a lazy vegetable-themed ballet. Dozens of carts dot the palace grounds. Some larger, some more ornate one even has painted vines spiraling around its wheels. They're lined up according to sun exposure, with wooden frames that can be propped open or closed depending on weather. Slaves and gardeners work in silent synchrony, adjusting angles and muttering observations about cloud cover like imperial meteorologists. It's charming, it's excessive, it's undeniably Roman. And here's your mainstream fact. For the evening, these mobile greenhouse carts described by Pliny the Elder are among the earliest recorded examples of controlled environment agriculture. That is humans deciding nature isn't quite good enough on its own, and bending it ever so slightly to their needs. Sound familiar? You stroll behind a young apprentice hauling warm compost in a basket. He's sweating, muttering to himself, and absolutely not thrilled about how often cucumbers need attention. You help him lift a panel and dump the compost into a bed beneath the soil tray. The warmth it gives off is instant, like a heating pad. This is how the plants survive the chill of Roman winters. It's worth noting that Rome didn't have a climate quite like today's Mediterranean postcards. Winters could be wet and brisk, and frost could wreak havoc on any delicate flora. So building movable specularia sun traps made of mica or thin oiled cloth was a clever if labor-intensive way to cheat the seasons. Your quirky tidbit for this section: some noblemen in later centuries tried to one-up Tiberius's greenhouses by creating cucumber baths for small animals. Why? Because nothing says I have too much money like bathing your pet lizard in warm brine next to your lunch vegetables. Historians still argue whether the Roman specularia were truly effective for winter harvests, or more of a symbolic flex. One camp insists they could only sustain cucumbers into late autumn, while others believe the system could provide viable cucumbers even during snow. The truth likely lies in the middle, not enough for empire-wide supply, but certainly enough for a picky emperor on an island estate. You run your hand along the edge of one cart and notice an inscription carved into the wood. Salubris et solarius, healthy and sunny. Whether it was a motto or a reminder, the phrase captures the Roman attitude toward curated naturalism. As the sun dips below the treetops, tiny clay lanterns are lit around the garden's edge. Their glow flickers across the translucent carts, making each cucumber greenhouse look like a soft lit lantern from within. It's strangely cozy. You'd never guess these were engineered for vegetable aristocracy. You pass by a group of servants fanning a particularly large cucumber vine. Not watering it, not feeding it, just fanning it with woven palm fronds. Apparently this one is sensitive to stagnation. You try not to laugh. The servant looks dead serious. In the background, you can hear one of the senior gardeners telling a tale to a new recruit. Something about the time a cucumber cart was accidentally wheeled into a senator's horse path, causing the animal to spook and dump a visiting dignitary into a fountain. The emperor was furious at the dignitary, not the cucumber. You make your way back toward the central path, where a table has been set up under a fig tree. No food, just scrolls. Engineering sketches, diagrams, notes in neat Latin script. One describes the ideal soil composition for winter cucumber beds. Another details the daily solar exposure tracking log. These weren't gardeners. They were early scientists. And this garden, it's not just decorative. It's a living research station. You sit quietly on a bench, watching the light fade completely now. The carts are still the vines coiled in sleep. A servant walks past with a steaming cup of something herbal. He hands it to you without a word. You sip. Cucumber tea. Of course. It tastes earthy, a little bitter, but oddly relaxing. You lean back, eyes drifting shut for just a moment, and picture the Empire's emperor lying on a chaise lounge somewhere nearby, staring up at the same darkening sky. His thoughts possibly drifting to politics, or just wondering if tomorrow's cucumber batch will be slightly crisper. Either way, they'll be wheeled into the sun again. Same dance, same obsession, same faintly ridiculous, utterly Roman devotion to making sure one vegetable never goes out of season. And now, neither will your interest. The garden is quiet now, steeped in shadows and soft lamplight. The carts are parked for the night, wheels locked mica lids, fogging gently in the cooling air. But you're not done exploring. Far from it. You rise, stretch, and slip through a narrow passage, leading toward the grand triclinium. Rome's formal dining room, where emperors and their guests reclined, gossiped, and slowly, very slowly, worked their way through feasts that could last for hours. You step inside and immediately the air changes. It's warmer, heavier, perfumed with roasted pine nuts, dried rose petals, and yes, vinegar. Platters line the edges of the room, and although the night's main courses have yet to arrive, the vegetable starters are already set. Marinated mushrooms, pickled garlic, and rows upon rows of thin, artfully curled cucumber slices, each one glistening under oil and herbs. This, you realize, is how the Roman diet wrapped its vegetables in politics. Tiberius didn't just eat cucumbers in solitude. He served them, shared them, even judged their preparation. To serve the wrong kind, too bitter, too limp, too warm, was a diplomatic risk. Emperors used food to send messages. Cucumbers weren't just nourishment. They were reputation, ritual, and status. And the further up the ladder you climbed in Roman society, the more crucial it became to serve your cucumbers with imperial flair. You recline on one of the couches. A servant pours watered wine into a bronze cup beside you, and another sets down a small dish cucumbers with honey and pepper. A surprisingly complex flavor, sweet and cool, with a spicy kick at the end. Romans loved contrast, hot and cold, soft and crisp, sweet and sour. A cucumber properly dressed was the ideal edible metaphor for Roman sophistication. Here's your mainstream fact for the hour: cucumbers were one of the most commonly depicted vegetables in Roman domestic frescoes, often shown sliced in bowls or served on wooden trays. They weren't just food, they were iconography. And the quirky tidbit: at one extravagant dinner under the Emperor Claudius, it said a nobleman arrived late and asked for cucumbers. In jest, Claudius ordered a servant to retrieve the emperor's cucumbers from the garden, despite it being midnight and raining. The poor servant obliged, returning soaked and shivering. Claudius, in typical form, applauded his dedication and promoted him. Moral of the story: in Rome, the cucumber was mightier than the scroll. You glance around the triclinium. On a side table lies a small wooden box filled with seeds, dark, glistening cucumber seeds, carefully labeled and stored. Seed saving was serious business. Romans took meticulous care in tracking which plants produced the best flavor size or medicinal effects. Elite households often kept their own garden journals passed down through generations. Historians are divided over whether Tiberius's obsession ever veered into the cultish. Some suggest the imperial court developed cucumber codes, green sashes for favored gardeners, or secret rituals where seeds were blessed before planting. Others say this is nonsense inflated by bored scribes with a love for satire. And yet you can't help noticing that even tonight's seating arrangement, each nobleman positioned according to status mirrors, the cucumber beds outside, some close to light, others left in shade. Coincidence or edible hierarchy? The main course is being carried in now: roasted dormice, salted fish, spiced boar. But you linger on the vegetables. The cucumbers are still there, dressed anew, this time in fermented anchovy sauce and dill. Oddly appealing. Slightly terrifying. You overhear a debate between two senators. One argues that cucumbers reduce flatulence. The other insists they cause it. A third, barely awake, mutters something about divine cooling powers. You sip your wine and let the debate fade into background murmur. Outside, a musician plays the aulos, a soft reed flute, its notes slow and soothing. Candlelight dances on bronze platters. The heat of the day is gone, replaced by a velvet hush that settles into your skin. You're full now, not with food, but with the ridiculous, gentle absurdity of it all. The layers of history, the rituals of dining, the tiny decisions that somehow defined emperors and echoed across empires. All through one humble green vegetable. The feast continues without you. You slip away, stepping lightly past the couches, past a yawning senator, and a half-eaten tray of pickled turnips. Back into the night air, into the whispering gardens where the cucumbers are sleeping under mica domes. They'll be wheeled again tomorrow, served with vinegar or honey or both, whispered over, argued about. And for one more day, the Roman Empire will turn quietly on the axis of its most coddled vegetable. You wake, if you ever truly slept, back in the imperial gardens, the first blue light of morning, brushing across the dew-speckled cucumber leaves. Somewhere off in the distance, a rooster crows with far too much confidence, and the gardeners are already at work. But this morning, you're not walking with Lucius. Instead, you're trailing behind a man in a crimson-edged tunic, clutching a wax tablet and muttering as he walks. He's not a cook, not a gardener. This is Drusus, one of the palace's Medici, a Roman physician. His task to gather cucumbers for medicine. You didn't mishear. Cucumbers weren't just food or status symbols. In the Roman world, they were also medicine, or at least they were believed to be. Welcome to the world of ancient prescription cucumbers. Drusus stops at a vine, examines a cucumber like he's choosing an engagement ring, and nods solemnly. This one will do. He gestures, and an assistant rushes forward with a small cushioned basket. The cucumber is placed inside with all the reverence of a sacred relic. You follow him through a narrow side path, ducking beneath grapevine-covered trellises, until you arrive at the valetudinarium, the palace infirmary. A quiet, shaded complex of rooms where noble patients rest on stone slabs and sip herbal infusions from clay cups. It smells like lavender vinegar, and something not entirely pleasant. Possibly leeches. Drusus places the cucumber on a marble counter and begins preparing it. First peeled, then sliced, then mashed into a greenish pulp with a bronze mortar and pestle. The paste is scraped into a small jar and mixed with honey. He hums while he works something that sounds suspiciously like a drinking song slowed down to lullaby speed. You watch as he applies the cucumber paste to a young nobleman's temples. The patient groans softly and mutters, "Too much wine, too much fish." Drusus nods wisely, and not enough cucumber. Here's your mainstream fact: ancient Roman physicians often prescribed cucumber-based treatments for headaches, skin inflammation, sunburns, and digestive issues. The plant's high water content and cooling effect made it a natural choice for the humoral theory of medicine, which emphasized balancing hot and cold within the body. The quirky tidbit: some Roman doctors believed that simply looking at a cucumber could soothe a fever. One text suggests hanging a cucumber above the patient's bed to draw out the fire. Another describes burying a cucumber under the floor to prevent bad dreams. Were these real cures or just leafy placebo? You be the judge. Historians are divided on whether Roman medical texts were sincerely grounded in science, or more of an educated guesswork with a few lucky hits. While some of the advice, like staying hydrated or cooling sunburned skin, holds up, much of it relies on symbolic thinking. Cucumbers were green and cool, so they must cool the body. That's how it worked. Logic through metaphor. You sit on a low bench and flip through a wax tablet of medical recipes. Some are vaguely familiar: aloe, fennel, vinegar. But others? Not so much. Cucumber mixed with ground pearl cucumber juice stored in goat bladder. One cure involves rubbing cucumber slices on your feet while reciting the names of the 7 hills of Rome. slowly, in reverse. Drusus offers you a taste of something he calls the Emperor's Elixir. It's cucumber juice mixed with date syrup wine and powdered charcoal. You take a sip. It tastes like regret. He beams, cleanses the humors, he says. You nod politely and set the cup down. Behind you, outside the infirmary, another physician is tending to a soldier with a bandaged leg. She presses a cold poultice made of cucumber pulp and barley flour against his calf. The soldier winces, then sighs. Better than hot ash, he mutters. Apparently cucumber is the preferred option when compared to cauterization. Fair enough. You wander the courtyard garden beside the infirmary. It's smaller than the Emperor's main garden, but neatly kept mostly herbs and simple vegetables. But yes, cucumbers are growing here too. Smaller ones. Medicinal strain, perhaps. They look slightly more bitter. You pluck a tiny one no longer than your thumb and roll it between your fingers. The skin is tough bumpy. This isn't the glamorous cucumber of the banquet hall. This is the working cucumber. The one that gets mashed, boiled, dried, and occasionally blessed. And here's the thing. Despite all this fuss, Roman medical cucumber use never really disappeared. Monasteries in the early Middle Ages kept the practice alive. Herbal manuals in the 10th century still listed cucumber as a cooling agent. Even today, somewhere in a spa brochure, you'll find a cucumber slice resting proudly on someone's closed eyelid. It's ridiculous. It's enduring. It's oddly beautiful. Back in the infirmary, Drusus is now applying cucumber juice to a noblewoman's arm. She was stung by a bee. She winces, then relaxes. It does help, she whispers. He nods proud. The Emperor insists we grow them ourselves. Outside, you sit once more on the bench beneath a flowering olive tree. The hum of bees in the lavender bushes lulls you into a deeper calm. You imagine yourself lying there with cucumber slices on your temples, drifting to sleep while Roman medics argue over whether your cough is due to an imbalance of black bile or the full moon. Either way, there's a cucumber involved, and somehow that makes it better. The soft clink of glass jars and the low bubbling of vinegar greet you as you step into the imperial kitchen. It's not the kind of place you'd expect to find serenity. There's heat smoke, sharp knives, grumpy cooks. But in this corner of the palace, there's a curious calm. Why? Because today is preserving day, and that means cucumbers. Dozens of them. Piled, sliced, brined, and packed away like little green time capsules. You ease your way between two amphorae and watch as a cook, round, red-cheeked and muttering about his aching knees, meticulously slices cucumbers into uniform coins. Too thick and they float, he grumbles. Too thin and they vanish. This isn't a salad prep line. This is alchemy. The pickling table is crowded with bowls of vinegar, honey, sea salt, mustard seeds, and even tiny slices of dried apricot. Roman cuisine adored contrasts, so of course even pickles had flair. Here's your mainstream fact: pickling was not only common in ancient Rome, but essential for food storage and transport. With no refrigeration and limited access to ice or cold caves, vinegar-based preservation was how vegetables like cucumbers lasted through travel, war, and winter. Every noble household had at least one slave or servant trained in the art of conservatio preserving. The cook, who introduces himself simply as Appius, invites you to try a slice of his latest batch. It's sharp, sweet, and spicy all at once, cucumber soaked in vinegar, honey, and black pepper. The texture is delightfully chewy. He beams at your expression. "This one's for the Emperor," he says, carefully placing the slices into a decorated glass jar. "We call it lacrima tiberi, Tiberius's tear, because it once made him weep with joy, or with indigestion. The record isn't clear." Your quirky tidbit. Roman love potions often included pickled vegetables. One scroll recovered near Pompeii details a ritual involving cucumbers, soaked in wine fennel seed and goat's milk, to be buried under a lover's threshold for 3 nights. On the 4th, the pickles were to be fed to the target, ideally without their knowledge. Romance, ancient Rome style. And here's your scholarly squabble. While Roman cookbooks like Apicius include references to vinegar dishes and preserved foods, there's disagreement among historians about just how widespread cucumber pickling really was. Some believe it was mostly a luxury of the upper class, those who could afford imported spices in glass jars. Others argue preserved cucumbers were a common fixture even among soldiers, thanks to their high water content and portability. The truth, probably both. The rich had fancier versions, the poor had saltier, tougher ones. You wander past another table where a young girl is carefully arranging cucumber spears into a sealed clay pot. She glances up. "These are for traveling," she says, "to send to Capri." Even after retreating to his island villa, Tiberius demanded regular shipments of his favorite pickled snack. Some were wrapped in damp cloth to keep them cool. Others were shipped in sealed beeswax jars. You follow a line of baskets stacked and labeled for transport: Capri, Antium, Ostia. Each one filled with tightly packed pickles padded with straw or wool. As much as Roman emperors demanded extravagance, they also insisted on continuity. Wherever they went, the cucumbers followed. Back near the hearth, a trio of cooks is testing something new: cucumares and garo. Cucumber soaked in fermented fish sauce. The smell is how to put this memorable. The flavor bold. Let's say that. You manage to chew nod politely and quickly grab a cup of watered wine to wash it down. Outside the kitchen, you find a small bench nestled beside a vine-covered wall. A few discarded cucumber skins lie in the grass, glinting faintly in the sunlight. You lie back full of brine and questions. How did a vegetable so humble, so watery, become the darling of an empire's pantry? Was it the soothing color, the crunch, the fact that, unlike power-hungry senators, cucumbers never talked back? You let your thoughts drift as the kitchen noise fades behind you. Insects hum. A cart rattles in the distance. And somewhere Appius is bottling another batch of imperial pickle, dreaming, perhaps, of one day naming a recipe after himself. Appian brine, you murmur to the sky. It has a nice ring. The sun is high again, warming the tiled roofs and marble courtyards. But your next steps lead you into the shade of a quieter space, the villa garden of Agrippina the Elder. No bustling carts here. No servants wheeling cucumbers like sacred cargo. Just stone footpaths winding through rows of herbs, low-hanging fig trees, and tidy plots of vegetables tended by hand. It feels older somehow. More private. You notice the cucumbers right away, smaller, narrower, almost wild. Not the emperor's pampered gourds. These are working cucumbers planted not just for taste or show, but for something deeper. Agrippina is not here in body. She's long gone, but her presence lingers in the hush. Daughter of Marcus Agrippa, wife of Germanicus, and mother to the future emperor Caligula. Agrippina was no stranger to politics, but she was also known for her intellect, discipline, and deep interest in herbal medicine. People whispered she could read omens in root patterns, that she knew which plants could heal and which could hush a rival. You kneel beside a small raised bed. A wax tablet rests nearby, water-damaged but still legible, a list of tinctures and poultices. Several mention cucumbers. One recipe stands out: succus cucumaris cum ruta et mels. Cucumber juice mixed with rue and honey. Applied to the forehead at dawn, it was said to ease melancholy and bad dreams. Mainstream fact: Agrippina, like many Roman noblewomen, maintained her own private hortus medicus, a medicinal garden. These plots were stocked not just with vegetables, but with healing plants believed to soothe everything from sore throats to heartbreak. Cucumber's inclusion speaks to its gentle touch, a natural coolant, a softener, a balm. Your quirky tidbit. There are unverified but persistent rumors, written in snide marginalia by Roman chroniclers, that Agrippina whispered to her cucumbers. Not just while planting or harvesting, but nightly under the moon. She believed they said that certain vegetables absorbed dreams and could protect her children while they slept. Was this superstition, political spin, ancient, trolling? Historians still argue whether Agrippina's plant whispering was a genuine practice or slander by rivals who feared her growing influence. Some point to her connection with the Stoic philosopher Musonius Rufus and suggest her gardening was rooted in self-sufficiency. Others claim she used her herbal knowledge to craft subtle poisons, though that may say more about Roman paranoia than truth. You trace your fingers over a carved bench near the cucumber beds. A tiny engraving hardly visible reads Vita sine timore. Life without fear. Perhaps the cucumbers weren't just plants to Agrippina. Perhaps they were anchors, something she could control in a world full of betrayal and shifting power. You lean back and close your eyes. Bees buzz in the thyme bushes. Somewhere nearby, water trickles from a lion head fountain, and faintly, impossibly, you think you hear a woman's voice, soft, rhythmic, like a lullaby. Maybe it's the wind, or maybe it's Agrippina whispering once more to the roots. You walk deeper into the villa. Here the walls are covered in frescoes, delicate fading images of vines, birds, and garden scenes. In one, a young boy sleeps beside a basket of vegetables, a cucumber tucked under his chin like a toy. A symbol of safety, or just the artist's private joke. You stop in front of a small shrine at the far end of the garden. Incense burns faintly. Offerings sit neatly on a low platform, olive oil, dried rosemary, and yes, a cucumber. Someone still tends this place. Someone still remembers. It's easy to forget how much women shaped the quiet edges of Roman life. While the Senate thundered and the legions marched, noble women like Agrippina grew the food, tended the sick, and told the stories. Their legacies lived not in statues, but in seeds. You crouch beside a fresh mound of earth. A new plant is pushing through the soil, tiny and green. You don't know who planted it, but you suspect they whispered too. From the stillness of Agrippina's garden, your journey takes a sharp, oddly theatrical turn. You hear it before you see it, a rising clash of metal, rhythmic stomping, and the unmistakable chant of a crowd. You follow the sound, drawn by its absurd energy, until you reach the heart of the imperial palace complex. And there, in the shadow of a colonnaded portico, is a makeshift arena. Today, it seems someone has decided to stage a spectacle, not a real gladiatorial match, but something stranger. Something involving cucumbers. Welcome to one of the more unhinged corners of Roman history, a day in the bizarre life of Emperor Commodus. You step closer and see the setup. A miniature amphitheater hastily constructed from wooden risers and marble benches has been erected in the emperor's private courtyard. Slaves dressed in patchwork armor wave wooden swords at each other. The crowd, composed of servants, court officials, and a few confused guests, cheers half-heartedly. And at the center, lounging on a raised couch with gold-threaded cushions, is Commodus himself. In one hand, a goblet of wine. In the other, a cucumber the size of a newborn. Commodus, who ruled from 180 to 192 CE, is often remembered for his obsession with gladiatorial games and his disturbingly theatrical reign. But what few realize is that he had a bizarre fondness for food-themed humor, especially when it involved vegetables, phallic jokes, and aggressive tableside entertainment. Here's your mainstream fact: Commodus frequently blurred the line between politics and performance. He liked to dress as Hercules fight mock battles and force senators to attend ridiculous feasts where the main course might arrive in armor. Today's menu, the Battle of the Salad. You watch as attendants wheel out a table piled with cucumbers, carved to look like gladiators. Some with tiny helmets, others with toothpick spears. A herald announces the green champion of Gaul meets the slicer of Sardinia, and someone, some poor someone, has to act out the entire match with vegetables. Commodus claps delightedly. Your quirky tidbit: there's a surviving anecdote from the Historia Augusta, suggesting that Commodus once attempted to knight a particularly symmetrical cucumber, naming it Defender of Rome. He then proceeded to order a toast in its honor, had it wrapped in purple cloth, and instructed the kitchen to serve it last, so it could witness the feast. Was it true? Was it satire? Scholars aren't sure, but it's deeply on brand. And here's your historian headache for the day. Some academics insist Commodus's antics were exaggerated by senatorial writers eager to discredit him after his assassination. Others argue the stories are so consistent across sources, no matter how wild, that they're likely rooted in fact. Either way, the image of a Roman emperor staging a vegetable battle isn't leaving your mind anytime soon. The mock match ends. A cheer rises. Commodus stands dramatically and raises his cucumber high. "A victor must be preserved," he shouts, tossing it to a servant who immediately scurries off toward the kitchen. To be pickled, perhaps. Immortalized. You duck away as another round of games begins, slipping behind a curtain into an adjacent dining hall. Even here, the theme persists. Cucumber wreaths adorn the pillars. A garland of dill and mint runs along the table's edge. Someone has even etched a tiny gladiator helmet onto a cucumber slice, served cold, of course. You sit exhausted and mildly entertained. It's hard to know whether to laugh or cry. Rome in the days of Commodus is a place where power wears a ridiculous mask, and sometimes that mask looks like a gourd. Still, there's something weirdly charming about it all. Amid the chaos, the cruelty, the theatricality, there's a deep, desperate craving for control. Even if that control comes in the form of cucumber pageantry. As you lean back in your chair, a servant quietly places a plate in front of you, grilled quail figs, and a perfectly crisp cucumber spear balanced like a sword. You chuckle. Then you eat it. Because in Commodus's Rome, you never say no to a cucumber. After the absurdity of Commodus's vegetable theater, you find yourself in need of quiet. A break from the noise, the laughter, and the oddly intimidating cucumber duelists. You wander downhill through a narrow garden path, and there nestled between rows of laurel and cypress trees lies a small temple stone steps, worn smooth by years of sandal soles, ivy creeping along its walls. It's no grand structure, not a temple to Jupiter or Mars. This one is rural, intimate, built for something smaller, something closer to the soil. You approach the threshold and pause. Offerings have been left at the base of the column, bunches of grapes, crusts of bread, dried lavender, and yes, cucumbers. Carefully arranged in a basket, each one polished to a gleam. A low incense burner smolders nearby, wafting the scent of myrrh and bay. Welcome to the strange world of sacred vegetables. While most people remember Roman religion for its thunderous gods and imperial cults, the everyday Roman lived alongside hundreds of domestic spirits, Lars, Penates, Genii, Loci, guardians of the hearth, the pantry, the neighborhood tree. And in this little corner of Rome, someone, maybe many someones, seem to have believed cucumbers were worthy of reverence. You step inside. The interior is cool still. On a small altar sits a modest clay figurine, a robed woman with a basket on her head. Scholars debate her identity, perhaps a rural fertility goddess, or one of the many local spirits adopted into larger Roman worship. Behind her, a faded mural shows vines curling up the legs of a kneeling man, his face turned skyward. Here's your mainstream fact: cucumbers, along with other garden produce, were commonly used as offerings during agricultural festivals like Floralia and Saturnalia. While not deified themselves, they symbolized abundance, fertility, and seasonal change. It was common to leave produce at shrines to ensure a good harvest, or even just a good week. Your quirky tidbit. In the town of Praeneste, a local tradition involved women walking in procession with cucumber wreaths on their heads during midsummer rites. One surviving inscription praises the keeper of the night garden, a title given to a young girl who could harvest a cucumber at exactly midnight under a full moon without waking the household dog. A miracle, a prank, maybe both. And your scholarly debate, some believe certain vegetables, especially those with distinct shapes, were linked to fertility cults or love magic. Cucumber-shaped charms have been found in Roman Britain and Gaul, often made of bronze or ivory. Were these merely body trinkets, or did they serve a deeper ritual purpose? Academics disagree. Some see them as protective talismans, others as crude jokes. The truth is slippery, like a well-oiled cucumber. You kneel beside the altar fingertips, grazing a bowl filled with dried cucumber seeds. They're arranged in a spiral. Whether this is art or ritual, you can't say, but the symmetry is pleasing. An old woman sits nearby on a low stool, humming to herself. She's weaving what looks like a bracelet from cucumber vines. You ask her softly what it's for. To keep sleep close, she says, tying off the end. Hang it above your bed. Keeps the bad dreams stuck to the leaves. You accept the gift, nod your thanks, and step back out into the sun. There's something hauntingly beautiful about the idea that even the most mundane things, cucumbers, vines, handfuls of dirt, once held a kind of magic. In a world of uncertainty, where emperors went mad, and cities burned, maybe a vegetable was the only thing that grew quietly and without argument. You follow a path down to a field outside the temple. A boy is planting something in the soil, whispering as he works. You ask him what he's saying. Names, he replies. So the plants grow straight. No twists. Whether it works or not doesn't seem to matter. What matters is the belief, the ritual, the moment of care. You tuck the cucumber bracelet into your belt, just in case. Because in Rome, even cucumbers might be listening. The air turns warmer and richer as you make your way toward the countryside estates beyond the city walls. Here the roads are dustier, the villas spaced farther apart, and the air carries a different rhythm, less spectacle, more soil. This is the domain of the Roman elite who retreat from the capital, not for peace, but for agriculture. Or rather, the performance of agriculture. You approach a sprawling villa perched on a low hill, its portico draped with grapevines and its gardens organized in flawless symmetry. Terraced rows descend from the estate like amphitheater seating, each bed neatly sown, each irrigation channel glinting in the sunlight. And tucked throughout, growing proudly, are cucumbers. Again, you start to see the pattern. Cucumbers aren't just an emperor's affectation. They're East status greens. Quiet markers of refinement, control, and wealth. A steward greets you at the gate, his hands stained with loam. He offers a tour. You follow. The cucumbers here are different from those in Tiberius's palace, thicker, more fragrant, and planted in raised stone beds designed for maximum drainage and sun exposure. Each bed is accompanied by a marble marker engraved with a date and a name, either of the gardener responsible or the guest of honor the crop was first served to. Yes, cucumbers are being grown like vintage wines. Here's your mainstream fact. Roman elites often used villa gardens as a way to display power, intellect, and proximity to nature. These villa rustica estates weren't just productive, they were performative. The inclusion of exotic or unseasonal produce like cucumbers reflected both wealth and cultural capital. Guests might be served an imported fish, yes, but it was the freshly plucked winter cucumber that made jaws drop. Your quirky tidbit. A satirical poem from the era mocks a senator who refused to eat cucumbers unless he had grown them himself with his own hands gloved. Of course, the joke being that the senator was far too squeamish for real dirt, but loved boasting about his gardener's instinct at dinner parties. Influencer culture, Roman edition, and the scholarly debate. Some historians argue that cucumbers were so overrepresented in elite gardens and banquet texts that they distorted our understanding of what average Romans actually ate. Cucumbers appear more frequently in literature than in archaeological middens, the ancient trash piles leading some scholars to wonder whether they were exaggerated symbols of elite affectation. Others point out that cucumbers decompose quickly, and their seeds are small and easily missed in digs, so the absence of physical remains doesn't necessarily mean they were rare. As you walk the rows, the steward explains irrigation practices. These cucumbers are watered not by hand, but by a clever system of tilted aqueduct troughs and clay pipes. Excess moisture is drained into a reservoir filtered through a bed of crushed charcoal and sand, then recycled. For cucumbers only, he adds with a reverent tone usually reserved for statues of Jupiter. You arrive at a shaded terrace where the dominus of the estate sits sipping wine and writing with a stylus. He greets you without looking up. "Do you garden?" he asks. You hesitate. "No, you admit." He grunts. "You will." He gestures toward a basket beside you, gloved hands, optional. You crouch down, select a plump cucumber from the nearest vine, and gently twist it free. The moment feels weirdly ceremonial. The dominus finally looks at you. "Straight and balanced," he says. "Good for slicing." Apparently that's a compliment. You sit together under the arbor, slicing cucumber onto crusts of bread rubbed with garlic and oil. The taste is clean, fresh, absurdly satisfying. The dominus tells you of guests who wept with joy at their first winter cucumber, of a senator who gifted a single vine as a dowry, of a poet who composed 27 lines about the way cucumber skins catch light after rain. You don't doubt it. As the sun dips lower, painting the sky in gold and rose, you look across the estate and understand cucumbers weren't just food. They were narrative. A curated expression of Roman ideals balance harmony cultivation. To grow a cucumber in winter was to bend the natural world ever so gently, and to do so elegantly was to prove you belonged to the Roman elite. You bite into another slice. Yes, you think. You definitely garden now. You've eaten well, perhaps too well. And now the gentle lull of afternoon heat wraps around you like a woolen blanket. But instead of returning to the palace or the villa's cool atrium, you're pulled by the sound of music. A quiet, lilting tune floats through the vineyard rows, a hum, then a verse, then a harmony rising above the drone of bees. It leads you to a shaded edge of the estate where small figures bend over cucumber beds. No togas here, no gold-threaded cushions, just linen tunics and rough sandals. The garden slaves. They're young, mostly boys and girls not much older than 12, and they work in silence save for the song. It's not a sad melody. It's repetitive, cyclical, like waves or wind. One phrase folds into another. You listen and realize it's a lullaby. But not for the workers, for the vegetables. Yes, they're singing to the cucumbers. One girl, Elia, sees you watching and waves you over. They grow better with song, she explains, brushing hair from her face with a muddy hand. Faster, straighter, less bitter. You crouch beside her, watching as she carefully weeds around a vine, loosening the soil with fingers like miniature rakes. Her movements are rhythmic, her humming unbroken. The leaves quiver in the breeze, or maybe in response. Here's your mainstream fact: in ancient Roman agriculture included many folk practices passed down through oral tradition. Workers often sang while planting or harvesting, not just for morale, but because it was believed to influence the crops. Songs to Dionysus for grapes, chants to Ceres for wheat, and yes, even soft lullabies for vegetables thought to be temperamental like cucumbers. Your quirky tidbit. In some regions, cucumber seeds were sown only after being warmed in the farmer's mouth. The belief was that a seed touched by breath would grow with more vigor. One poet even claimed that whispering secrets to a cucumber vine ensured a better yield as long as the secret was never shared with another human. And here's the debate. Historians are divided on whether these traditions were widespread or hyperlocal. Some argue they were rituals practiced primarily by rural slaves and smallholders, and thus rarely recorded by literate elites. Others see these practices as part of a larger lost body of agricultural mysticism, a folk wisdom the Romans lived by, even as they wrote about laws, wars, and philosophy. Elia finishes weeding and stands brushing dust from her tunic. She beckons you to follow her toward the edge of the garden, where a tiny spring bubbles up from a crack in the stone. The water is channeled into narrow wooden troughs that trickle into the cucumber beds. She dips her fingers in, then scatters drops on a particularly leafy vine. "This one's mine," she says proudly, "named him Septimus." You raise an eyebrow. She shrugs. "If they listen to me, I should listen to them." You wander further and notice that many of the vines have charms tied around their bases, bits of ribbon, tiny bells, carved stones. Talismans, protective maybe, or identifying marks. You pass one marked with a carved clay medallion in the shape of an eye. Another has a feather tucked beneath its leaves. Aaliyah explains some of them dream. If you plant them right, they remember. You don't ask what she means, you just nod. In the shade of an olive tree, a group of the children have laid down their tools. One boy strums a lyre with clumsy fingers. Another gently drums a rhythm on an empty seed jar. They're making music again, not quite a performance, not quite idle noise. Just rhythm. Sound. Something steady for the cucumbers to grow by. You sit with them a while, the earth cool beneath you, the sky turning a pale, sleepy blue. A cucumber vine brushes your ankle, its tendrils light and curious. In this moment, cucumbers are not a status symbol, not a joke, not a medicine. They're just quiet living things tended by quiet living hands, nurtured by voices that will never be remembered in marble, but which might echo if only faintly somewhere in the soil. And when Elia sings again soft and slow, you hum along. The late afternoon sun casts long shadows as you leave the singing garden behind, following a gravel path that winds downhill through olive groves and apricot trees. In the distance, a shimmer of water catches your eye, not a river or a pond, but something more deliberate. You reach a low stone wall and peer over. Below lies an aqueduct spur, a marvel of Roman engineering, gently sloping for miles across hills and valleys to carry fresh water to villas' baths and fountains alike. But here, at the base of a quiet slope, it's been rerouted. Not for human thirst, not for marble basins, for cucumbers. This is where you learn about the aqueduct to salad pipeline. A gardener stands barefoot in a shallow trench, adjusting a wooden gate that diverts water into a small series of channels, each one branching into stone-bordered vegetable beds. The cucumbers here are plump, glistening, and outrageously pampered. You can practically hear them sigh with pleasure. He greets you with a nod. Freshest from the spring, he says, pride thick in his voice. No one eats the sewer-grown ones anymore. Not since the emperor banned it. You blink. Sewer-grown. He laughs. You don't know the story. And so, reclining against a fig tree, as cool water gurgles nearby, he tells you, here's your mainstream fact. Roman cities, especially large ones like Rome and Carthage, had sophisticated systems of aqueducts and underground drainage. While the best water went to the rich, lesser-quality water, and even gray water, was often recycled for use in gardens. In less fortunate neighborhoods, even waste runoff could be repurposed to irrigate vegetables. And yes, that included cucumbers. Your quirky tidbit. One particularly salty piece of satire from Marshall describes a stingy host serving salad fresh from the sewer, implying both frugality and poor taste. Another anonymous graffiti in Pompeii warned, "Don't eat the greens from the street vendor on Vico del Cervo. His cucumbers taste like the bathhouse." Was it a joke, maybe? Was it true, also maybe? As for the historical debate, scholars differ on how widespread this practice truly was. Some argue that lower-class Romans routinely used greywater irrigation out of necessity, while others believe the practice was limited and heavily stigmatized. What's clear is that cucumber irrigation became a proxy for wealth and sanitation. To serve sewer-grown cucumbers to a guest was tantamount to social suicide. Back at the estate, the gardener shows you his aqueduct filtration system, sandbeds, charcoal layers, even crushed oyster shells. It's a laborious process, but the result is clear, mineral-rich water that trickles evenly across the cucumber roots. These ones, he says, pointing to a particularly large specimen, were watered with mountain melt. You don't dare ask what the others were watered with. He hands you a cup filled with sliced cucumbers, chilled in spring water, and a splash of grape must. It's subtle, refreshing, and tastes vaguely like honesty. You walk with him as he checks the flow rate using a small stick to stir sediment from the channels. A leather-bound logbook at his hip contains neat rows of notes: soil, moisture, cucumber, curvature, leaf angle. Too much water and they rot, he explains. Too little and they turn bitter. You nod. It's always balance with cucumbers. Sunlight and shade, heat and cool. Clean water, but not too much. It feels like tending a mood, not a plant. You sit on a low wall and dangle your feet into a trickling trough. The water runs past your ankles, heading toward a row of vines that curl along the ground like sleepy green snakes. A donkey brays somewhere in the distance. The wind rustles olive leaves. And in the quiet, you think about all the people whose days revolved around getting water to the right places, not to the Senate, not to the army, but to a crop that was somehow always worth the effort. Because what was more Roman than mastery over nature, over seasons, over thirst? You lie back and listen to the gurgle of the aqueduct, the lifeline that turned dust into dinner. You imagine a cucumber growing inch by inch beneath the surface, nourished by a trickle engineered centuries before. And somewhere in a palace miles away an emperor is already waiting for it. Evening creeps back over Rome, its light softened to gold and amber, and the air cooling just enough to invite appetite. You're led now into a villa not far from the Palatine Hill, a place known more for its physicians than its philosophers. The floor beneath your feet is a mosaic of herbs and vegetables. Garlic, onions, fennel, and front and center, a proud green cucumber winding like a lazy serpent. You know where this is going. A man in a deep crimson tunic greets you with a weary wave. "You're just in time," he says, gesturing to the long marble bench beside him. The emperor's stomach is acting up again. This is the imperial digestive drama. And tonight's co-star, our old friend, Cucumis Sativus. You settle in and watch as a tray of carefully prepared dishes is brought out. The emperor's physician, let's just call him Vitalis, inspects each one with the seriousness of a general reviewing his troops. There are boiled lentils, roasted figs, and front and center steamed cucumber slices dressed with cumin and vinegar. Tiberius, they say, believed cucumbers calmed the belly. But he wasn't alone. The Roman medical tradition held that cucumbers were cooling, moist, and soothing for hot and dry constitutions. Perfect for emperors with fiery tempers, and even more volatile digestion. Here's your mainstream fact. Roman medical texts like De Medicina by Celsus and later Galenic writings often recommended cucumbers for indigestion, internal inflammation, and even to soothe a sore throat. They were also one of the few vegetables allowed to be eaten raw under strict medical regimes, though always with a dash of vinegar or honey to correct their coldness. Your quirky tidbit. One emperor, possibly Claudius, was so obsessed with regularity that his chamber pot was built with handles padded and placed near his dining couch, so he could relieve himself between bites if necessary. Records show that lightly pickled cucumber was often used to soften the stool. You can't make this up, and the scholarly debate. Historians still argue whether the Romans' preference for cucumbers in digestion was rooted in actual results, or if it became fashionable medical lore. Some suspect the cool, high-water vegetable was simply gentler than other Roman staples. salted fish and barley porridge, while others think the cucumber's gentle crunch became a placebo, something cool to nibble, while the real treatments took effect. You trail Vitalis into the Emperor's private chamber, where a plate of cucumbers rests beside a small vial of garum, the fermented fish sauce Romans adored, but which would horrify modern stomachs. Vitalis frowns at it. "Not tonight," he mutters. "The bowels are tender." Instead, he pours a cucumber tonic into a delicate glass vessel. It's a cloudy mix of juice, diluted vinegar, and crushed coriander seeds. The Emperor sips slowly, wincing, then nodding. A good sign. The Emperor speaks his voice low. "Will it keep the dreams away?" Vitalis hesitates. "Only if you chew slowly." You raise an eyebrow. The physician shrugs. Dreams begin in the belly. You find yourself wondering if that's true. If maybe all these stories, all these anxieties, all these empires, maybe they all just needed a little more fiber. Out in the courtyard, a slave peels cucumbers by moonlight, the strips falling into a neat pile beside her. She hums. It's always humming, isn't it? Nearby, an older man crushes dried mint and cumin in a mortar, preparing sachets to place beneath pillows. Good for the air, he explains. Keeps the winds from rising. Roman digestion theory believed that gases traveled through the body like storm fronts upward. Winds could cause headaches. Downward winds, well, let's just say cucumbers were involved in both. You lie down on a bench, arms crossed over your chest, watching stars prick through the purple sky. Your own stomach makes a polite sound. Perhaps it too has become Roman. A servant brings you a late-night snack, cucumber slices soaked in honey water topped with pine nuts. It's oddly comforting, wet, sweet, crisp. Not filling, not overwhelming, just enough. Maybe that's the whole trick. Rome, for all its violence and decadence, sometimes knew how to be gentle. Especially when it came to digestion. Especially when it came to cucumbers. You drift through the palace corridors, your footsteps softened by polished marble and the distant hush of fountains. Tonight, there's no feast preparation. No parade of pickles being wheeled under silver domes. Tonight, you follow candlelight into a smaller, quieter room. Not a kitchen. Not an infirmary. A study. Here the air smells of parchment beeswax and crushed herbs. You step inside and find yourself in the presence of several Stoic philosophers. Calm, expressionless men wrapped in simple woolen robes, seated in a half circle around a low brazier. They do not glance up as you enter. One scribbles slowly on a wax tablet. Another cradles a cup of wine untouched. A third chews meditatively on, yes, of course, a slice of cucumber. This is no joke, no party. This is the serious vegetable lounge. Welcome to the moment where stoicism meets snacking. You take a seat quietly, not wanting to break the rhythm. The philosopher nearest you, an aging man with an immaculately trimmed beard, nods slightly, then speaks. "Let not your happiness be dictated by hunger," he murmurs. "But if hunger comes, let it not be of salted pork." There's a pause. Then another adds, "Unless the pork is wrapped around cucumber." Stoicism, as you recall, prized moderation, simplicity, and self-control. So it's no surprise that a food so crisp, so cool, and so profoundly boring as the cucumber would find a home here. Unlike roasted meats or spicy sauces, cucumbers offer no temptation. Just hydration. Just quiet. Here's your mainstream fact writers like Seneca and Musonius Rufus often wrote about the importance of simple diets in fostering moral clarity. Seneca himself once noted the dangers of dining with the drama of emperors, and praised instead the virtues of figs, barley, and green vegetables. Though cucumbers are rarely name-checked directly, they appear often enough in commentaries and menus to suggest they were Stoic approved. Your quirky tidbit. A student of Epictetus once wrote a letter home describing a test of the will in which he spent 3 days, eating nothing but raw cucumbers, sprinkled only with ash and cold water, so that his soul might not be stirred by longing. He ended the letter by admitting that on the 4th day he wept with relief at the sight of a boiled turnip. The philosophical debate. Some scholars argue that the Stoics' embrace of simple food wasn't just ethical, it was political. In a Rome where luxury defined power, refusing rich food was its own kind of rebellion. Others countered that it was more performative than practical. After all, many philosophers still dined well when no one was watching. You bite into a cucumber slice handed to you by a silent attendant. It's room temperature. Plain. Utterly unsalted. It tastes like a clean breeze. The philosopher across from you closes his eyes and smiles. Do you feel the stillness, he asks. You nod. You do, a little. On the table are scrolls open to annotated margins. On anger, on the happy life, on the shortness of time. Someone has sketched a cucumber in the corner of one. Is it a joke or a kind of Zen mandala? A long pause. Then one of the younger scholars speaks. If all life is indifferent and cucumbers are part of life, then cucumbers too are indifferent. Another responds, true. But they are not unpleasant. You lean back, staring at the flickering shadows on the wall. The fire pops quietly. The room smells now of rosemary oil as someone pours a bit onto the coals. From another corner of the room, a monkish figure reads softly. We seek serenity not through extravagance, but in the curve of an unseasoned green. It's a poem, apparently. A haiku before its time. You look down at your hands, still holding the cucumber slice, still chewing slowly, still entirely at peace. Outside the city of Rome hums and rattles merchants, haggling soldiers, barking torches flaring. But here in this small room filled with parchment and restraint, the vegetable of choice remains crisp and untroubled. And so do you. A soft drizzle begins as you leave the study, the first hints of night rain tapping lightly on the terracotta roof tiles. The scent of wet stone rises as you walk across a flagstone courtyard slick with moisture. You wrap your cloak tighter, not out of cold, but instinct because tonight you're headed toward the docks. Yes, really, the cucumbers are going sailing. You arrive at the edge of the Tiber River Rome's muddy lifeline, where the last light of day flickers on the water like shaken bronze. Along the quay, merchants and dockhands shout back and forth, loading amphorae baskets and bundled scrolls onto shallow trading ships. And there to the side, half covered in linen and resting in straw-lined crates cucumbers, carefully packed, labeled, tagged for destinations far beyond the city. It turns out cucumbers aren't just a Roman delicacy, they're going global. You crouch beside one of the crates and read the charcoal-scrawled tag, Smyrna, another, Lutetia, and one more, Alexandria Urgent. Clearly someone on the Egyptian coast is in dire need of a crisp vegetable. Here's your mainstream fact. Rome's vast trade networks, both overland and maritime, enabled the exchange of crop seeds and food preservation techniques across continents. Cucumbers, likely originating in India, made their way west through Persia, Mesopotamia, and into the Mediterranean via Greek and later Roman cultivation. By the time of the empire's height, they were being actively shipped, preserved, and grown across Europe, North Africa, and parts of Asia. Your quirky tidbit. One preserved ship manifest from the 2nd century CE includes a curious line item, 12 jars cucumber, brined for the use of the governor's stomach. Not for sale, not for soldiers. Just for one man's digestion, apparently too delicate to tolerate foreign food. And the scholarly debate. There's uncertainty about whether Romans actively exported cucumbers as a food commodity, or if it was primarily seeds and growing knowledge that spread. Some argue preserved cucumbers were shipped to elite outposts, especially during winter or siege. Others believe the real export was botanical Rome, sending its love of cucumbers abroad via colonists' villas and soldiers' gardens. The truth, likely both. You step aboard a small barge for a moment, the wood creaking gently beneath your feet. A sailor hands you a slice of dried cucumber, an experiment, he says, soaked in honey and sun-dried for long journeys. It's leathery, a little odd, but not bad. He points to the crates. They'll be in Antioch by week's end, if the winds hold. You look across the water. Somewhere beyond the horizon, people you'll never meet will unwrap these cucumbers, slice them thin, and maybe wonder if they taste like home or like Rome. Nearby, another dockhand packs sealed clay pots into a padded chest. For Britannia, he mutters, winter comes early there. These ones are pickled with cinnamon and fennel. You raise your eyebrows. He shrugs. The governor's wife likes them spicy. The crates are lifted, hoisted, and stacked with great care. No bruises, no cracks. Each cucumber's journey is a small act of diplomacy, carried with the same gravity as fine wines or imperial messages. You follow the procession inland slightly to a market square, where foreign merchants exchange goods from across the empire. A man from Mauritania offers purple dye. Another from Syria sells citrus. And a woman from Cyprus displays packets of cucumber seeds tied with tiny ribbons of papyrus. Sweet breed, she tells a customer. Not bitter. Imperial strain. You're beginning to see it cucumbers as currency, as culture, as soft green proof that Rome's reach is everywhere. That even in the furthest corners of the known world, someone is slicing a cucumber just like you are now. Back at the river's edge, the ships are casting off. The sailors shout farewells. You watch as one barge pulls away its lantern, flickering like a firefly, across the rippling water. Inside it, dozens of cucumbers floating gently down the Tiber and into the bloodstream of empire. You smile. Even vegetables travel well, it seems, if treated with enough reverence. The riverboats vanish into the night mist, and you turn from the docks, wandering slowly through the maze of Rome's quieter streets. The city is drowsy now, its markets closed, its fountains murmuring in the background. Lanterns flicker in windows, and the sharp aroma of roasting chestnuts lingers in alleyways. But tonight you're headed somewhere far less peaceful. A library. Yes, a Roman library. Dusty, dimly lit, and filled not with scrolls of heroism or war, but with disagreements. Scholarly ones, confused ones, petty ones. Because now it's time to examine what truly keeps historians up at night. Who actually started the cucumber craze? You enter the library through a colonnade, nodding to a sleepy scribe who barely looks up. Inside it smells of wax olive oil and the dry, reassuring scent of old papyrus. Shelves groan under the weight of scrolls, each one labeled with ink-stained tags: Pliny, Columella, Cato, Galen. Anonymous, highly suspicious. You settle at a reading table, and an archivist shuffles over with an armful of texts. All the cucumber references, she mutters. Good luck making sense of them. And indeed, the sources are a mess. Some praise cucumbers. Some condemn them. Some claim they were discovered by the Greeks. Others by the Persians. And one scroll partially burned appears to insist cucumbers were invented by Neptune himself after a bet with Apollo. It's in terrible verse. Here's your mainstream fact. Historians agree that cucumbers were introduced to the Mediterranean from India, likely via ancient trade routes that predated Rome. The Greeks adopted them, but it was the Romans, particularly under the Empire, who elevated them to imperial celebrity. Yet the exact timeline of their rise is blurry at best. Your quirky tidbit. In one misattributed scroll of uncertain date, a writer known only as Agrippa's cook claimed that Julius Caesar himself once refused to eat cucumbers unless they had never been touched by slave hands. The quote is suspiciously perfect. Modern scholars believe it was invented centuries later as satire. Still, it ended up in dozens of medieval herbal manuscripts. The scholarly debate. Oh, it's deliciously messy. Some claim Tiberius was merely continuing a Greek tradition. Others argue he was the true pioneer of Roman cucumber obsession. Then there's a minority who point toward Livia, his mother, and say she cultivated them first, feeding them to her son from infancy to cool his nature. A few German scholars even insist cucumbers only became widespread in Rome after trade with eastern provinces increased in the 1st century CE. You flip open a commentary by a particularly bitter rhetorician who accuses his rival of cucumber envy, not metaphorically, but literally arguing over access to greenhouse-grown specimens during a particularly hot Roman summer. You sigh. You sip lukewarm water from a bronze cup, and you realize that no matter how crisp the cucumber, the trail it leaves through history is never a straight line. In the back of the library, you find a series of anonymous notes pinned to a board, quick arguments scribbled in frustration. Tiberius did not invent greenhouse carts. Look at the mosaics in Carthage cucumbers there too. Seneca said cucumbers were morally neutral, interpret that Fabius. It's clear the cucumber wars of modern academia rage quietly but persistently. You chuckle to yourself. Maybe the emperor's obsession was just a passing culinary trend. Or maybe it truly did spark 2,000 years of horticultural one-upmanship. Either way, you're glad the scholars haven't agreed. Because if they had, you wouldn't be here lost in the quiet thrill of disagreement, poring over footnotes in candlelight surrounded by voices long dead, but still grumbling over vegetables. You leave the scrolls behind and step outside into the cool night. A distant owl hoots. Somewhere nearby, water trickles from a fountain shaped like a lion's head. You pause. In its mouth, a cucumber stem, half carved, weathered but unmistakable. You smile. Of course the scholars are still fighting, because in Rome even a cucumber comes with a footnote. Rain taps gently on red rooftops as you wind back toward the city's edge, where houses give way to humbler neighborhoods. Courtyards with cracked tiles, narrow lanes cluttered with carts and open doors that reveal clay ovens and candlelight. The grandeur of palaces is behind you now. Ahead lies something just as important, the world of ordinary Romans. And in their world, cucumbers aren't for show. They're part of stories, whispers, warnings. You've arrived at the realm of cucumber superstitions. A boy sits cross-legged in a doorway, holding a slice of cucumber against his forehead. To stop the thoughts, he explains, not looking up. You ask what kind of thoughts? Too many, he says simply. Mama says cucumbers pull them out. You nod. That tracks. Here's your mainstream fact: in the folk practices of rural and urban Romans alike, cucumbers were often used not just as food, but as objects of household magic. Considered a cooling plant, they were believed to calm both body and spirit, and were frequently included in rituals to promote peace, fertility, and sleep. Your quirky tidbit. A 3rd century papyrus scroll from Egypt contains a charm for quieting noisy neighbors. A cucumber is to be hollowed out, stuffed with crushed mint and ashes, and buried beneath the neighbor's doorway at dawn, while chanting the phrase, silence for silence, breath for breath. Whether this worked or just made the neighbors more suspicious is unclear. As you stroll through the dim lanes, you spot cucumbers hung from door frames on string, some fresh, some dried to leather. A woman explains that they keep away hot spirits, the kind that cause fevers, nightmares, and marital arguments. Her grandmother once tied a cucumber under the marriage bed so the bride wouldn't burn with foolishness. You pass a communal oven where 3 elderly women sit shelling beans and telling tales. You ask if they know any cucumber legends. They all nod. One recounts the story of the sleeping vine, a cucumber plant said to grow only in moonlight. If you eat from it while it's flowering, you'll dream of your future child. Another remembers the bitter curse, where a man who mocked a midwife's garden was forced to eat nothing but cucumbers for a year. He wept at his wedding, she says, because the banquet was all cucumbers too. And a third tells the tale of the talking cucumber. You must sleep with a fresh one under your pillow for 3 nights. If on the 4th morning it has curled to the right, it has heard your secret. If to the left, it's keeping one from you. Scholars would dismiss these stories, of course. No citation, no context. But as you sit among them, eating warm bread with cucumber relish, you realize that truth isn't always a scroll. Sometimes it's in the hush between sentences, the way a grandmother touches a vine as if it breathes. The superstition isn't the cucumber itself. It's what it represents: care, continuity, something cool and green in a world of sun and dust. You thank the women and rise to leave. One presses a small, shriveled cucumber into your hand. Hang this by your bed, she says. If it falls in the night, it means your thoughts were too heavy. You carry it like a talisman through the alleys, its weight barely noticeable, but somehow reassuring. As the city sleeps, and the richer homes glow with oil lamps and scrolls, you pass under a laundry line, where children have tied cucumber vines in knots, each knot holding a pebble, wishes, perhaps, or promises. You've seen cucumbers grow in royal gardens, sail across the sea, and serve as imperial medicine. But here, in the lamplight of the city's underbelly, they've become something older and softer, a whisper of meaning in the shape of a vegetable. You step into the night, the charm still in your pocket, because who are you to argue with dreams? The moon is high now, casting a silvery glaze across the rooftops, and the city has gone quiet. Even the taverns have shuttered. You walk along a stone wall, trailing ivy and dew, your steps light. There's a gentle hush in the air, like the empire itself is finally asleep. But not quite everyone is resting. You duck beneath a low arch and follow the flicker of lamplight into a narrow room filled with scrolls, ink pots, and the unmistakable scent of lavender oil and beeswax. It's a private study tucked behind a merchant's home. A lamp burns low, casting a golden halo across a wooden desk strewn with parchment. You lean in. What you find here is not philosophy, nor agriculture, nor trade. It's poetry, letters, and all of them in one way or another are about cucumbers and love. Yes, you've stumbled into the warm, mildly ridiculous world of Roman cucumber flirtation. One scroll reads, "To Petronia, whose eyes are darker than fig syrup, I send this cucumber, tender, slender, curved just so. as a token of my restraint and desire. Do not slice it until the moon rises, lest it blush before I do. You sit back. That was suggestive. Here's your mainstream fact. Roman poets and lovers often used food imagery. Grapes, honey figs, and yes, cucumbers as part of their flirtation and metaphor. While cucumbers might seem less glamorous than pomegranates or dates, their distinctive shape and seasonal associations made them fertile ground for double entendre and gentle teasing. Your quirky tidbit. In one surviving collection of anonymous love letters, Epistolae Cucumeres, a name scholars still argue about, a young scribe writes, "When I saw your foot press the garden bed and the cucumbers trembled, I knew even the vegetables loved you." This line was later copied into a medieval manuscript margin next to a drawing of an overly emotional zucchini. You find another letter, this one more innocent. "My mother gave me 2 things, her name and her cucumber pickling method. I offer you both, marinate me in your gaze." You snort softly. Of course not all the letters are earnest. A few are biting. One angry note reads, "You are as cold as a half-cut cucumber left on the stone sill overnight. May your next suitor taste only bitterness." The ancient version of a romantic burn. But the truly charming ones, the ones that make your chest ache a little, are the awkward love notes, written by hands clearly more familiar with ledgers than poetry. A merchant's assistant writes, "I saw your braid fall while you stooped to pick cucumbers. I have not eaten since. If your father allows, I will trade him 10 jars of vinegar for your hand. Also, I make good bread." It's simple, honest, maybe even successful. And now the scholarly debate. Do we take these letters seriously? Are they literary exercises? Roman teenagers learning metaphor? Are they jokes? Or do they reflect real hearts writing in real time? Some scholars believe they were preserved in a kind of anonymous letter bank for lovers too shy to write their own. Others think they were private and intimate, lost only because someone swept them into storage with broken roof tiles and old grain. You set the scrolls down, careful not to smudge the ink. On the wall, a small painting faded, but clear shows 2 young lovers sitting in a garden. Between them, a cucumber sliced lengthwise on a plate, the seeds shaped like tiny hearts. You lean back on the low bench and close your eyes. You can hear the voices now, not philosophers or emperors or gardeners, but regular people. A girl laughing behind a market stall. A boy mumbling a verse he barely remembers. The hush of someone writing by lamplight, pausing between lines to wonder, will they smile when they read this? In a world ruled by iron marble and empire, even love finds its way into the vines, and the cucumbers, silent as always, bear witness. You wake to the faint scent of vinegar and ash. The air feels heavier now, not with heat, but with the quiet stillness of endings. Rome has grown dim, not just in this hour, but in spirit. The streets are quieter. The stone buildings seem older, wearier. Ivy climbs higher over cracked statues. Dust gathers in doorways. The empire vast and relentless is beginning its slow decline. And yet, amidst all this, cucumbers endure. This is Horace, the final act of the imperial cucumber. How a vegetable outlasted marble gods and broken laws. You walk through a villa where the mosaic floors are chipped and the walls scrawled with graffiti. It was once a senator's home, now occupied by a merchant family, the atrium repurposed into a drying space for herbs in pickled jars. A boy is sorting cucumbers into baskets by size. His grandmother supervises cross-legged on a stool, humming an old tune. They grow smaller now, she says, but they still grow. Here's your mainstream fact during the 3rd and 4th centuries CE. As Rome faced invasions, internal turmoil, and political fragmentation, many of its grandest estates fell into disrepair. But household gardening, including the cultivation of cucumbers, continued. Shrunken plots replaced sprawling gardens. Terracotta pots took the place of stone beds, but the green vines kept climbing. Your quirky tidbit. In a crumbling copy of an agricultural treatise found in Gaul, a later Roman farmer scribbled a note in the margin. When the gods fall silent, plant cucumbers anyway. It's unclear whether this was philosophy sarcasm or just stubborn advice, but it stuck. And the scholarly debate. Some historians argue that the persistence of kitchen gardening, particularly with crops like cucumbers, represents a kind of slow resilience in the face of decline. While taxes fell apart and legions rebelled, small food systems endured. Others suggest it's coincidence that cucumbers survived because they were low maintenance and water-rich in drought years. Either way, their presence in late Roman cookbooks and herbal texts proves they never disappeared. You continue walking through a half-abandoned villa where pickling jars rest against a cracked colonnade. The garden has shrunk to a single raised bed, but the vines still curl. A girl tends to them with a broken spoon. She doesn't notice you. She's too focused, misting the leaves with a clay bowl of rainwater, murmuring under her breath. You listen. She's repeating the same phrase again and again. Grow straight, grow sweet, grow green. Down the road, the forum is no longer a place of speeches and decrees. It's a market now chaotic and cobbled together. Blankets spread with trinkets, jars, dried fruit, and yes, cucumbers. One seller waves you over and offers a slice speared on a twig. It's soft, soaked in honey and lavender. A morning pickle, he says, to remember sweeter days. You buy one. It tastes like longing. Nearby, a group of children is playing a game with cucumber vines, wrapping them into hoops and tossing them onto sticks. A man with scarred arms watches them and says, "Even if Rome breaks, the games go on." As you make your way back toward the outskirts, you pass a shrine, mostly rubble now. The paint has faded. The offerings are fewer. But someone has left a cucumber wrapped in linen. Carefully, lovingly, and on the stone base someone has etched a line with a sharp nail. The empire fell, but the vines kept climbing. You step away and feel the weight of time. Empires rise with fire and ambition and fall with whispers and rain. But gardens, they wait. They adapt. They grow again. In a world of ashes, something green still curls from the soil. The road is quiet now. You walk a path worn smooth by centuries of footsteps, emperors, poets, slaves, scribes, and now, you. The air is cool. A breeze moves softly through the grass, and overhead, the moon gleams like polished marble. You've left the city entirely moving beyond its last ruins through olive groves and into something ancient and still. There at the edge of a forgotten field, you find a garden at the end of the world. It's not large, maybe 10 steps across, surrounded by crumbling stones once meant to keep out goats or gossip. No estate, no statue, no name on a plaque. Just a patch of earth tilled by hand, turned each season by someone who doesn't ask what empire they belong to, only whether it will rain. You kneel beside a row of vegetables, garlic onions, leafy greens, and cucumbers. They're unremarkable, not regal, not even particularly straight, but they're real. You touch one. It's cool smooth and smells faintly of sunlight and clay. Who planted them? A farmer's widow, a monk, a child, learning where to place their thumb. There's no inscription, no shrine, but the vines have climbed the stones anyway. The cucumbers here grow as they always have. Patient, quiet, unnecessary to history, but deeply necessary to life. Here's your final mainstream fact after the Western Roman Empire's collapse. Much of its horticultural knowledge was preserved in monastic gardens and passed through generations of local farmers. Cucumbers remained a common fixture, easily grown, easily shared. Their presence continued through Byzantium, the Islamic Caliphate's medieval Europe, and eventually into your own kitchen drawer. Your last quirky tidbit. In the 9th century, a monk in what's now Germany wrote a gardening manual describing cucumbers as God's cooling finger, a phrase so poetically strange that it's been quoted by scholars, chefs, and confused herbalists ever since. And the final debate, scholars still argue whether Roman cucumbers ever truly vanished, or if they simply became so ordinary, so common, they slipped beneath the notice of history. Some see that as tragedy, others as triumph. You lie back beside the garden, the soil warm beneath your spine, the stars spinning lazily above you. You think of everything imperial carts, sacred rituals, digestive tonics, whispered lullabies, and pickles ferried down the Tiber. You think of empires built and broken, of scholars arguing over vegetable footnotes, of children singing to vines they hope will listen. You close your eyes, and you think perhaps that the most Roman thing of all isn't the conquest, the columns, or even the poetry. It's the cucumber, still growing, still here. The garden fades from view, replaced now by softness, by the gentle hum of night insects, by the breath of earth settling under starlight. The world has slowed to a whisper, and so have you. You're resting beside vines that have seen centuries unfold. You've traveled through emperors' feasts and philosophers' debates, through temples, kitchens, and shipholds. You've heard lullabies for vegetables and letters of love shaped like green curls. And now, nothing demands your attention. Let the sounds dim. Let the stories drift like dandelion seeds through the dark. No more carts to push, no scrolls to read. Just the simple rhythm of growth and rest soil and seed. You don't need to remember the facts or the jokes or the old debates. They've folded gently into the quiet where only your breath and the rustle of leaves remain. And maybe, just maybe somewhere in your dreams you'll find yourself in a garden again, a single cucumber vine curling toward the sky, not to conquer, not to impress, but just to be still, steady, alive. Sleep well, traveler. You've made it to the end.